Welcome to another episode of the MMA Lockcast. I'm your host, Manpreet, aka MMA Lock of the Night, your boy on social media at MMALOTN, and the architect behind the MMA Fight Archive, ensuring that you leave no stone unturned when you're researching these upcoming MMA events. Not only do we have UFC, Bellator, and LFA this weekend, but we also have Aries FC and A1 Combat, which is Uriah Faber's fighting promotion. And then to end off the month, we also have ACA, we have Cage Warriors, and there's PFL as well. So if you're looking to do research on those upcoming events, make sure you check out the MMA Fight Archive with direct links to past fights for all the competitors competing on those cards. Make sure you take full advantage of the 7-day free trial, which is available with the link in the description below. You'll thank me later. Try it out. Enjoy it. All right, this week, well, for the second time this week, we're breaking down another card. We got Bellator 301, which by all accounts seems to be the last event for them on the year and possibly under the management that they currently have. Obviously, everybody knows that they've been sold to PFL at this point in time. There hasn't been a real legitimate announcement as of yet, but I think that they're just waiting for this one event to finish, and then we'll finally see the transition to the PFL banner or whatever they're going to be looking to do with the new management. There's a bunch of solid fights throughout this card, and that's what it's been like for the last couple of Bellator events, as they're really looking to showcase the top talent, stacking their cards from like 15 to 20 fights scheduled, and just putting on as many title fights as possible. On this card, we got 2 title fights. Obviously, in the main event, we got Yaroslav Amosov taking on Jason Jackson. In the co-main event, we got the unification bout for the bantamweight title between Sergio Pettis and Patchy Mix. And we also have a lightweight Grand Prix matchup here between Patricky Pitbull and Alexander Shabliy. So, and not to mention a bunch of other great fights throughout the card as well. The fights take place in just over 5 hours or 6 hours, if I'm not mistaken. So I want to rifle through these 16 matchups as quickly as I can for you guys. Always happy to get out the Bellator breakdowns because I know you guys appreciate it. I can see it from the amount of views these videos normally get when I'm even late with them. We still crack the 4-digit mark, so I'm very happy in regards to that. And again, trying to be as good as I can with the timing of these breakdowns, but there's always life circumstances getting in the way in terms of being on the spot. Lastly, before getting into the breakdowns, if you're looking for LFA breakdowns, there's 8 fights tonight for that promotion. I have breakdowns for that strictly on the Patreon page, my Lock of the Night Patreon page. Check for the link in the description below for that as well. And I guess there is no reason to halt the breakdowns any further. Let's get right into them. Again, I'm going to rifle through them pretty quickly so that we can get through it in a timely fashion, so you can digest it in a timely fashion and then make your bets or fades if you disagree or agree with me, whatever it might be. All right, clearing the throat. Let's get this show on the road. First fight of the night, Landu versus Isael Kobayashi. Both these guys are pretty old. We got a 35-year-old going up against a 37-year-old, but I'm going to lean with Landu as he's been way more active as of late. He's way more explosive and powerful in the early going of these matchups, and I think that his speed is going to catch Kobayashi off guard, and we'll see an early finish for Landu. Am I comfortable with his chalky line at this point? Probably not, so I'll probably pass on it as a whole, but I do think Landu is the side here, and I think he gets it done inside the distance. Next up, we got Ramazan Kuramagomedov going up against Randall Wallace, and I was very surprised to see the line as wide as it is. I haven't really been impressed with Kuramagomedov, even though he's 11-0 from his very abysmal performance against Jordan Williams on the Contender Series a couple years back, to even his fight against John Howard. Not the most impressed. You know, he's a Dagestani wrestler looking to get fights to the ground, but he has a questionable striking game, even though he landed a good knee on Jaleel Willis to finish him last time around. Outside of that, I don't know he has too much of a striking game. His cardio is a big question mark as well. And his opponent this weekend, Randall Wallace, is a veteran, a 34-year-old who's, I believe, a double champ for A1 fighting, if I'm not mistaken, or A1 combat, if I'm not mistaken. But Very solid, durable, tough fighter. BJJ black belt, has some big power in his hands as well, and he's very durable, which will be very important for him, especially if he's able to survive the early onslaught here from Kuramagomedov. This should allow him to get this fight into the late and deep waters, and I think from there he could possibly find a finish of his own as Ramazan starts to slow down. So I'm gonna take a very small sprinkle on Wallace, who I was able to get at plus 1100 on Bet Online yesterday. If you want to take us inside the distance, if that's a better line that you can get, probably not a bad way to go about it. But this line is far too wide. Minus 2,300 for a fighter as flaky as Ramazan Kuramagomedov. Very surprised at that line. Give me Wallace, and Wallace inside the distance. Next up, we got Cody Law going up against Bellator debutant Jefferson Pontes. Law obviously had that 2-fight losing streak that he had to I believe it was Jason Gonzales and Chris Lencioni, and then he bounced back last time around. Very strong wrestler, working on his striking, but most importantly, working on being able to dish out damage when he's getting his grappling going. And that's kind of been the downfall in his losses. And now that he's looking to put an emphasis on that, I think that we'll see a better performance from him, even against the undefeated 6-0 Jefferson Pontes. Pontes looks like a decent striker with a educated grappling game, but I think he's going to be at the mercy of the wrestling of Cody Law, allowing Law to take this fight wherever he needs to get the job done. I think he grinds this out over 15 minutes, and I think he gets it done by decision. Next up, Islam Mamedov going up against Kielholtz Mota. This is a matchup between two fighters that normally like to implement a grapple-heavy approach. However, I think Mamedov is the better technical wrestler here, and we've seen Mota struggle with the guys that are technically better wrestlers, as he did against Mike Hamel, and as he was kind of struggling against Kenneth Cross early on in that matchup. But luckily for Mota was way more active, had the better cardio that night, and was able to finish Cross in the second round. But I think Mamedov has a good enough gas tank to go out there and pull off a solid win here. I know a lot of people are low on him because he lost as a big favorite last time around to Sydney Outlaw, but I think that has a lot to do with the fact that people are underestimating what Sydney Outlaw's actual potential is. I think Mamedov will control the majority of this matchup with his wrestling. Mota might have a little bit of an advantage in the striking realm, but I think that Mamedov will more often than not be able to get this into the grappling realm and control it there and win it by decision. Next up, we got Mike Hamel going up against Tim Wilde, a fight where I'm still kind of puzzled as to why Tim Wilde was able to beat a guy like Chris Gonzales. I was very high on Chris Gonzales going into that matchup. He was even my lock of the night prediction that night, but he didn't chase after the wrestling as much as I expected him to. Whether it was the constant movement, changing of stances, or even just the long-range weapons that Tim Wilde was implementing, it seemed like when Chris was actually going for takedowns, he was able to land them, get some good control time, and that should have been enough for him to continuously go out there and do that and win it by decision. But Tim Wilde landed more devastating blows and impactful blows, and that ultimately got him the scorecards from the judges to win that fight. But this is a fight with Mike Hamel, who's another relentless grappler who can go out there and kind of strike, but I think he does his best when he's able to get his hands on his opponents, drag them to the ground, and look to dominate them from that top position. I may have some PTSD from Tim Wilde's last fight, which is why I don't have a whole lot of confidence on Mike Hamel, but I still believe that he should be able to go out there, grind this fight out, and win it by decision. Next up, we got Mattos going up against Richard Palencia. Very weird fight here, considering that both guys are coming off some pretty nasty leg injuries and extended layoffs as well. We saw Mattos injure his knee while preparing for a big matchup against Josh Hill last August, and he's been on the shelf ever since then. On the flip side for Richard Palencia, he was undefeated on the LFA scene and was also their bantamweight champion when he signed to Bellator as a 10-0 prospect. And unfortunately for him, he injured his leg very badly, a very gruesome leg break in the second round of his matchup against CJ Hamilton. And that saw him sit on the shelf since October of last year. Palencia is normally a fighter that likes to go out there and grind his opponents against the cage, drag them to the ground, and try to do some damage from on top. Not a lot of his wins have been coming from finish as of late, which leads me to believe that he's not really seeking the finishes. He's more happy with just grinding his opponents out and getting his hand raised by decision. Mattos is a strong grappler in his own right and is probably the better striker in this fight as well. So I'm going to be leaning with the Brazilian fighter here, but it's tough to have uber confidence on either side considering the significant injuries both of these guys are coming off of, not to mention the layoff as well. But I'll go with Mattos, and I think he eventually finds the finish in the second or third round. Next up, we got Kerry Taylor-Melendez going up against Shabliy Sengul. Kerry is obviously the significant other of MMA legend Gilbert Melendez. She comes from a striking background, but she showcases very solid jiu-jitsu skills as well, as you would expect from somebody who's married to a BJJ black belt. She likes to go out there and implement her striking heavy approach against her opponents, utilizing her footwork and her combination striking from distance to either touch them up, drop them, get them to the ground and pull off submissions, or just be comfortable enough to go out there and outpoint her opponents for 15 minutes. Her opponent, Shabliy Sengul, comes in with a 3-3 record, with all three of her wins coming against opponents that are making their professional MMA debuts. She looks very timid and shy in the striking realm, especially when she's fighting somebody that's not a complete tomato can. And if they are complete tomato cans, she looks to drag them to the ground and punish them from that top position. I don't think she's at the level of Kerry Taylor-Melendez. If you want to give Sengul anything here, she's been more active as of late in terms of staying in the cage. But Taylor-Melendez still far more skilled than Sengul in my opinion. I just don't see where Sengul wins this matchup. And if you're getting Taylor-Melendez anywhere between -200 and -250, I think that line is a steal and worth the chalk straight up. I get it. It's women's MMA, but I feel like Kerry Taylor-Melendez is tailor-made for this matchup to go out there and outpoint Sengul over 15 minutes. She might even be able to get a club and sub at some point as well, but I'm fine with her money line at -235. Next up, we got Archie Colgan going up against Peter Buist. I love Colgan, probably my favorite Bellator prospect as of right now. I believe he continued his undefeated streak last time around when he beat the biggest opponent to date, which is Emmanuel Sanchez, utilizing a striking heavy approach, mixing in his wrestling behind it, and dominating from that top position. Normally, he would look to use his grapple heavy approach early in his career, but over his last couple of fights, he's showing off the improved striking skills that he has and the power that comes with it, as we saw in the Justin Montalvo fight. His opponent this weekend is a far superior striker, technically speaking, as he is a Dutch kickboxing champion, if I'm not mistaken, but also getting up there in age. We saw Buist give up the first 2 rounds to Gadzi Rabadanov last time around and was coming on strong in the third round, but it was just too little too late for him at that point. I think Colgan would be wise to use his grappling in this matchup, looking to avoid the kickboxing of Buist, wearing on him early on in this matchup, and then maybe letting his hands go later on as he continues to wear and slow down Buist. I'm a little turned off by the -1100 on Archie Colgan, even though he's my favorite prospect on the roster. So I'm probably looking to avoid this fight, but Colgan should be able to control the majority of it and win it by decision. Next up, we got Timur Khizriev going up against Justin Gonzales. On the Khizriev side, we got an undefeated fighter who has 2 solid victories with the Bellator promotion thus far. His debut came against the most tenured Bellator fighter in Daniel Weichel, and then he followed that up with a decision victory over Richie Smolin. This guy's very smooth with his striking, but also blends in his takedowns very well behind that. He trains out of American Top Team and is improving at a very steady rate and could end up finding himself in title contention depending on the future of the Bellator organization. His opponent, Justin Gonzales, is a solid all-around fighter as well, normally utilizing his slick striking approach, and he seemed to have decent defensive grappling in past fights, but Mads Bernal was able to control him for the majority of 15 minutes last time around, taking him to the ground and pounding him out from that top position, winning that fight by decision. Gonzales needs to keep fights on the feet to have success, but I think he's going to struggle to do that here against a guy that blends his striking and grappling as well as Timur Khizriev. Give me Khizriev here, and I think he wins this fight by decision. Next up, very intriguing fight here between veteran Denise Kielholtz as she takes on rising up-and-comer Sumiko Inaba. Now, Kielholtz is coming off a victory over Paula Cristina, which stamped a two-fight losing streak for her, but it wasn't that long ago that Kielholtz found herself in a championship fight, and she possibly got robbed on the scorecards when she went out there and lost a decision to Juliana Velasquez. Unfortunately, a rough run for her over the next couple of fights kind of made her irrelevant at the top of the division, but a big win over Paula Cristina definitely reminded people of what she's capable of. She has a Dutch kickboxing style, and she's very powerful when she throws her strikes, so it's kind of surprising that she doesn't have more knockout victories on her professional MMA record. But she's very good in terms of sticking to the plan, utilizing her combinations and nasty leg kicks to damage her opponents. her opponent this weekend, Sumiko Inaba, had pulled off the biggest victory of her career last time around, where she was able to outscore and sweep Vita Arteaga on the scorecards by outstriking her and sticking at range and utilizing her long-range weapons. And that's kind of the clash that we have here, is the power Dutch kickboxing striking style of Denise Kielholtz, and then the long-range weapons of Sumiko Inaba, with possibly a slight grappling advantage as well. However, we haven't seen Inaba effectively use her offensive grappling for me to believe that she's worth taking the chalk in this spot, and I get it. The public is on her side, the hype is on her side, and even the momentum is on her side in terms of either women's careers, but considering that this is the most skilled striker that Inaba has faced, and we're getting her at plus 130, I think Kielholtz is worth a little bit of a shot here, and I think she can land the more damaging blows and win this fight by decision. Next up, we got a heavyweight matchup between Tyrell Fortune and Marcelo Golm. Last time around, Tyrell Fortune won his fight by disqualification after he had some solid success with his wrestling, but then when he was shooting for another takedown, his opponent pummeled the back of his head as badly as I've ever seen anybody illegally strike the back of an opponent's head. That caused Fortune to pretty much not be able to continue that fight. It was very bad how much he was being affected by that. But we know what Fortune's game is. He's looking to take opponents to the ground, grind them out from that top position, looking for finishes, preferably, because once he gets into deeper waters, it's harder for him to secure those dominant positions so that he can continue to go on and win fights by decision. He goes up against a very experienced Marcelo Golm here, who was looking pretty damn good for about 2.5 rounds until he ran into a big bomb from Daniel James last time out, putting his lights out clean. But I think that Golm is a better overall fighter here. I think he has good enough defensive grappling to not get completely mauled by Fortune in the early going here. And I think the longer that this fight goes, his striking advantage will completely show off, and that will allow him to keep Fortune at bay, hurting him badly. And I think he can potentially finish him in the third round of this matchup. So give me the underdog money on Golm and look for him to weather the early storm, come on strong late, and get the finish. All right, next up, the lightweight Grand Prix fight that we have here between Patricky Pitbull and Alexander Shabliy. I'm kind of surprised that Pitbull is still as relevant as he is, but I think a lot has to do with the fact that his name value. I know the majority of that name value comes from his brother, as his brother is clearly the better fighter of the two, but Pitbull still, made it to the next round of the lightweight Grand Prix after butchering and finishing Robert D'Souza earlier this year, but I think he's in for some shit here against Shabliy, who's probably one of the better pickups for Bellator in the last couple of years. Patricky is obviously a constant striker who likes to use leg kicks, but I think the slick sniper-like striking style of Alexander Shabliy will allow him to pick apart Pitbull and eventually finish him in the second or third round. I know this is a 5-round fight, which in my opinion favors a guy like Shabliy, and I think that Shabliy can use a mix of his grappling and his striking, but it's more often not his striking that gets the job done to put his opponents away. So I get it, Shabliy minus 750 favorite, not a lot of meat on the bone there, but maybe honing in on his round props. Round 2, round 3, round 4, I think if you sprinkle those, you should be able to find some profit, as I think that he will finish this fight. Like I said, that first round will be a feeling out process, but after that, he should be able to find the finish without too much issue. Next up, we got a showcase bout here between AJ McKee Jr. and Sydney Outlaw. AJ McKee obviously finding himself outside of the lightweight Grand Prix after he was forced out of his matchup back in July due to some sort of medical issue. Now he's taken on Sydney Outlaw, who I believe was eliminated from the tournament, but Outlaw, very solid fighter. Sorry, Outlaw was not a part of the tournament. He pulled off a big, He pulled off a big upset over Islam Mamedov last time around, where he controlled the fight for pretty much 80% of it, landing takedowns and also controlling the back of Mamedov. That's Outlaw's game. He is a smothering grappler, and if he can get his hands on you, it's going to be tough to get him off of you. I think AJ McKee is better than Mamedov in terms of utilizing his striking to maintain his range, making Outlaw pay on desperation takedowns with, threatening with chokes or even just working back to his feet. And I think that AJ McKee can pick him apart and utilize the more damage-heavy approach to win this fight by decision. But I'm not so keen on the heavy chalk on the McKee side. I think he might be kind of benefiting from what Pitbull is benefiting from as well now too, in terms of the name value that he brings. He only really has one loss on his record to date, so I can't harp on him too much, but I think it's going to get harder for him to acclimate to the 155-pound weight class, especially against a strong grappler, against a guy like Sidney Outlaw. So you have to keep in mind that McKee is still building his muscle, building his weight, so that he can be comfortable at this 155-pound frame, and that could leave some openings for Outlaw to take advantage of him, outmuscle him, bully him, and possibly get some good grappling positions. However, I'm going to trust in the skill advantage, overall skill advantage that McKee has here, and I think that he'll go out there, batter Sidney Outlaw over 15 minutes, and win this fight by decision. All right, grudge matchup next here between Raufeon Stots and Danny Sabatello, which is a rematch of a fight that took place during the Bantamweight Grand Prix last year. That night, Raufeon Stots landed the more damaging blows, which ended up allowing the referees or the judges to score the fight in his favor. It was a very close fight where Sabatello had some solid control time of his own, but he was just pretty much holding and not doing much damage, which is why Stots was able to go out there and get the win. Now we're seeing Stots obviously coming off that loss to Patchy Mix, and Danny Sabatello picking up a win over Marcos Breno, but then last time around getting finished by Mamedov. Sabatello coming in as a very slight favorite in this matchup, which is kind of a surprise considering that Stots got the best of him last time around. I think Stots' defensive grappling is good enough to deal with Sabatello early here, and that should allow him to stuff the takedowns, stay up against the fence, land the more damaging blows as Sabatello continues to try to look for takedowns, and just like the first fight, he'll likely get his hand raised by damage on the scorecards. Again, close fight. I'm not completely counting out Sabatello, as I think he has tried to make an emphasis on trying to land more damage during his grappling realm or during his grappling sequences, but I think that Stots is good enough in terms of defensively. That should allow him to stay out of bad positions and from eating too much big damage, and that will allow him to land the more damaging blows, like I said, and win this fight on the scorecard. So give me the slight underdog in Raufeon Stots to go 2-0 against Danny Sabatello. All right. Co-main event time, bantamweight title unification bout here between Sergio Pettis and Patchy Mix. A fight that I am very excited for, as both guys are probably the two best bantamweights currently on the roster. Sergio Pettis has made big improvements since his days in the UFC, and that shows considering the fact that he is the champion and most recently pulled off a big victory over Patricio Pitbull last time around, defeating him on the scorecards, pretty much shutting him out outside of one round. His striking, all combined with his takedown defense improvements, has been a huge help for him to be as successful as he has with the Bellator promotion. But I think he might be in for some shit here against a guy in Patchy Mix who's bigger, stronger, and likely can get him into positions that Pettis may not be able to get out of. Patchy Mix is a smothering grappler with one of the best choke games in the, and not just in Bellator, but in all of MMA. As soon as he latches onto your neck, more often than not, he's taking it on home with him. I think he can force some scrambles here that could give up the neck of Pettis, and we could potentially see Mix grabbing onto it, but I could also see Mix utilizing a more of a patient approach and looking to control Pettis and try to grind him out over 25 minutes, or at least win 3 of the 5 rounds to get his hand raised by decision. The chalk is a little bit too much for me on Patchy Mix here, but I just don't see enough value on the Sergio Pettis side to take a dog shot on him. Even though he cashed as a plus 170 underdog for me last time around against Patricio Pitbull, I think Patchy Mix is just a tougher and more difficult matchup for him. So give me Mix by decision, and I think he will be the new unified bantamweight Bellator champion. All right. That brings us to our main event of the evening, where we got Yaroslav Amosov taking on Jason Jackson. Very fun fight here. I believe this is the for the welterweight title. Amosov 27-0, absolutely crazy what kind of record this guy has, and he's been fighting some solid fighters throughout it. Most recently, he picked up his second victory over Logan Storley, making his first fight not look as his second fight looked way easier than he did the first time he fought him. He's very slick all around. He has a very educated striking game where he throws in combinations and stays patient from distance, but also has a grappling edge against most of his opponents where he's able to take them down and grind them out from that top position. This guy's great cardio as well, something that I used to question in the past, but as of lately, he's been looking good, especially in championship rounds. Jason Jackson, on the other hand, is a guy who His last victory, I believe, was summer of last year. Mainly getting this fight because there's really no more contenders for Amosov to go up against. Jason normally utilizes a grapple-heavy approach to take his opponents to the ground and grind them out, but I think Amosov is far better than him in almost every situation in this matchup. He's a better striker, he's a better grappler, probably has the better cardio as well, and not to mention has way more 5-round experience. So I'm going to lean with Amosov here pretty heavily, and I don't mind his minus 400, minus 450 price tag either. Whether you want to just bite the bullet and take the chalk straight up or throw him into parlays, I love Amosov in this spot, and I think he dominates, showcasing why he is potentially the best welterweight on the planet. There you guys go. Breakdowns on all 16 fights for Bellator 301. Again, I believe the fight goes down at 5 or 6 p.m. Eastern today. Appreciate you guys checking out the episode as always. LFA breakdowns on the Lock of the Night Patreon page. Link for that in the description below. And I'll be back later today to drop another UFC segment, obviously doing the 4-in-1 segment video that I normally do. And then next week is an off week for the UFC, although I'll be dropping Cage Warriors breakdowns on the Patreon page. The following week, we're back for the UFC last 3 events of the year in December for the UFC. And we'll be back to regularly scheduled programming, dropping the breakdowns on Monday, and then obviously the segments on the consecutive following days. Love you guys. Appreciate you guys. Drop a comment, drop a like, drop a subscribe if you haven't already. Good luck this weekend, and I'll see you guys again later today. Peace.